Good afternoon, friends. I'm grateful that you chose us instead of other things that you had available here today. But before we dive into today's topic, I want to paint a little bit of a picture for you for the context of the conversation. So I know we have people that are in different capacities here at ATSU and have different roles and responsibilities and different ways of engaging with our students and supporting our students. But for a second, hoping to capture everybody in their role, I would like for you to imagine that you're about to walk into your classroom to deliver a lecture, or perhaps maybe you're about to start a lab, hands-on demonstration in a lab session. Or for those of you that work in a clinic setting, maybe you're preparing to coach up your students on the clinic floor. Whatever the case may be, you're walking in. No matter the environment, you find yourself surrounded by your students, and they're desperate to learn all the intricacies that you have to offer about your profession. They're staring at you. You're about to deliver an awesome instructional experience, but suddenly you realize that they're about as motivated as a sloth the Monday after the Super Bowl. Fear not. All right. So today we're going to cover a secret formula that I say will help capture their attention, boost their learning capacity, and turn your classroom, lab, or clinic into the hottest spot in town. Okay. Maybe not the hottest spot in town, but at least in the academic world, it will be on fire. So, are you ready for this? All right. So, all right, I love it. Love the enthusiasm. So to get us pointed in the right direction here for today, I would like to start by asking you to weigh in on a few questions with me. All right. So for those of you that have not used polling software, feel free to use your mobile devices if you have them handy. You could point your camera at the QR code and to access these questions. There's two questions. Or if you're on your computer and next to what you're viewing today's session with, you can go to slido.com. And at the top of the page, you should see a place to put a code in. This will help you access the questions. The code is 1985, pound 1985 991. I'll give us a few minutes to do that as we get warmed up. Has anyone used Slido? Asking people that might multitask. Okay, a few folks. Okay, good. It's my new favorite polling tool. But take your time. For those of you who want to weigh in on these two questions, I think it will help us frame today's conversation. All right, we got some folks typing already. This is awesome. Let me know if you need help. All right, here come the question answers to the question. The first question rolling in. Keep going. There's a second question if you'd like. But just to review, gain new knowledge. Absolutely. Gain new perspectives. Love that. That's interesting. Acquire new knowledge, skills through education. Can't argue with that. Gain new knowledge, skills, or attitudes. So we're expanding on what it is that we're acquiring. I'd argue in a way that allows them to use in diverse contexts and after learning experience ends. Okay. I would argue with you. I just want to know who we're arguing with about that definition. It's a good definition. But yeah, acquiring new knowledge and skills through education. So now we're talking about how we do these things. This is great. Fantastic. For those, hey, Victoria, some folks, Bree, some folks joining us. We're just taking a minute to answer a couple poll questions. If you care to catch up, you can either use your phone by pointing at this QR code on screen, or you can just go to slido.com and enter the code at the top. You should be able to see the questions after you do that. Code is pound 1985. It was a great year. I was wearing parachute pants. And 1985 991. Hey, Shelly, you're not sick of the TLC yet. I love it. Thanks for hanging in there with us. All right, so I'm gonna push forward here, continue on and address that second question. which talks about your role here. How do you currently structure your instructional experiences to ensure learning objectives are met and retained by your students? So many of you address this concept in your answer to what is learning, but you want them to acquire some new knowledge, skill, or attitudes, new perspectives, those type of things. So what do we do to help them do that? And this is no right or wrong answer, but just curious who is here and what ways you engage with your students currently. I'll try to adapt today's conversation based on your responses, but we got a lot of folks saying by incorporating multimedia interactive elements, group work, fantastic, lectures and presentations, clinical experiences, love it. And I don't know why I put none of the above, but I should probably put other as a better distractor because I hope no one says none of the above. Julie's going to give me feedback right after today's call. But okay, good. So not to be too shocked here, but the top ones here are at the top. That's fantastic. We have some variety. We have some folks in the clinical setting. This is helpful. Please feel free to continue to weigh in on these questions. We collect that data and on the back end, and we use it for future presentations. But let's get to it. I want to review questions first by talking about the definition of learning. In simplest terms, it's the acquisition of new knowledge, skill, or attitudes, KSAs. Some of you already alluded to that. But I wouldn't argue with any of the other definitions either. I think it's all kind of the same thing, just different words, perhaps. But in terms of learning science, KSAs is pretty popular: knowledge, skills, and attitudes. And I also like that some folks included that it's the result of something, right? It's the result of exposure to a stimuli of some sort or interaction with a particular learning environment. And learning involves the internalization and retention of this information that we share with them, which can then be applied or adapted to different contexts or situations. I love that somebody brought that up. Learning is also measured in different ways, usually in terms of cognition changes, behavioral changes, or different emotional responses, right? That aligns to our KSAs. We also know that there's various factors that influence the learning process, how students learn, including students' individual backgrounds, what they bring to the classroom, clinic, or the lab itself. We also know their prior knowledge about the topic influences how we teach them and how they learn. Their motivation, right? Whether it's being there physically or towards the topic, that's an important factor. And then the quality of instructional materials that they're learning from, that also influences how they learn, how efficiently they learn. So ultimately, learning is why we're all here, everybody that's here today. And we all want to help our students adapt, grow, and enhance their capabilities while they're in their respective programs here at ATSU. We agree on that, right? Fantastic. So let me talk about the learning process itself. This will also help today's conversation. Learning process. So in addition to the definition of learning, it's going to be important to understand the learning process. How do people learn? How do people consume information to be able to do those things that we just talked about? Here's a simplistic graphic that I think represents, symbolizes the learning process, right? At its core, learning occurs through different interactions between the students and instructional materials facilitated by educators who design and deliver learning experiences, us, right? As depicted in this graphic, to deliver an effective learning experience involves recognizing the role of the cognitive processes such as attention, memory, problem solving, as well as identifying environmental factors that I previously described. So what is our role? We all play a role, but what is our role in this learning process? Did anybody care to come off mute or type in the chat what they believe our role is, or their role is, your role is in this learning process? All right, got some chats coming in. Facilitator, Victoria, spoken with experience. Love it. Guidance and facilitation. Mentor. Okay. Yeah. So I think this is these are great adjectives here, right? Right. Absolutely. Yes, Rachel. Yes. All stages. Yes. I love that. So we're talking about the actual role, facilitating the learning process, right? But also we're responsible for creating positive, safe environments. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with any of these. I wouldn't argue against any of these. Absolutely. We play a crucial role in this. We're responsible for facilitating, fostering this learning environment, delivering engaging interactions, right? Related to the instructional materials, the instructional topic. And we're also responsible for providing opportunities for active participation, instructional feedback, facilitating assessments to deepen the students' ability to apply this new knowledge, skill, or attitudes, right? So what if I told you there's a established framework for designing and delivering effective learning processes that matches how people learn? Would you believe me if I told you that exists? I was looking for somebody to say no. Well, I'm glad that you all believe me so far. This is good because my plan today is going to show you a framework today that matches what I believe matches the learning process as you know it here today. So here we go. Yes, it does. Cutco steak knives. Here's the framework in just a second. Before we get into that framework, I need to tell you a little bit of background about where this framework comes from. It comes from a profession called instructional design. All right. What is instructional design? Anybody care to answer this question, except for Aaron and Julie? Everyone give a crack at this term? I believe we all have heard this term in some capacity, right? What is instructional design?
How about I'll go for it.
Love it.
So instructional design is a way of structuring education in a manner, in whatever manner, it can be the different manners that it is understood and reaching the learners.
Love it. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It's the art and science combined in figuring out the methodology for how people learn and delivering instruction, designing and delivering instruction, right? So we're all in some way, some form responsible for instructional design. But here's the really cool question, maybe a harder question, as an instructional designer is about to join us here, Sue. Who's the first instructional designer? Does anybody know the answer to this question? There'll be some steak knives sent to you if you know the answer to this question. As Sue joins us, who is considered the original instructional designer? And I'll give you a hint. It's not Julie, Aaron, Brenda, or me. And it's not even Sue, who's an instructional designer, among other things, for CJHS. Does anybody know who the original, who's considered the founder of instructional design? Anybody know this?
See, I was going to say Aristotle.
Oh, you know what? See, you're too smart because I didn't think of that. But you know what? You might be able to say that his philosophical approach to learning for sure. That's a good one. As far as modern instructional design, it is not. I don't think it's. I don't think Aristotle's ever quoted as saying he's an instructional designer. But if he is, I'm going to look into this for sure. But the answer is Dr. Robert M. Gagné, sometimes called Gagné, but I'm going to stick with Gagné for today. But Robert Gagné, has anybody heard of Robert Gagné? Okay, few folks. Okay, few folks. So just a little bit about him. He's a famous instructional designer. He's most noted in educational psychologist circles for his conditions of learning theory. This is one of the earliest forms of instructional design as on paper. It's born from Skinner's drill and practice behaviorist approach to learning and training, right? Gagne, Bob, as I like to call him, like I know him, it's emphasizes the importance of organizing instruction, as Bree said so eloquently, in a systematic, logical manner to maximize learning outcomes. So Gagne was one of the first people to do this in the 50s and 60s. Gagne's framework has led to more modern learning theories. So even if you hadn't heard of him, you might recognize his work in directed instruction. Constructivism is largely attributed to Gagne's theories. and experiential learning, which then spawns into things like problem-based learning, team-based learning, and some of these other things. So this is not, even though it's from the 50s, it still lives on. He's most famous for two things that I'm going to share with you today. First of all, he's famous for falling asleep during his teaching. He's at Florida State for many years. There are people that still are alive that have taken his courses. And if you ever bump into him, ask him about what it was like to take a class from him. You couldn't tell if he was awake or asleep. That's the rumor. That's the legend. He'd be in the class and you would think he's sleeping, and then he would wake up and say something, and then he'd go back to sleep. He was famous for this. But he was even more famous for coming up with what's called the 9 events of instruction. Oh, narcolepsy. I don't think Bob had narcolepsy. That would make more sense. But Bob just did what Bob wanted to do. I find it a little ironic that the person responsible for modern day instruction fell asleep. And it's going to get even more hilarious when you find out what these 9 events are. I don't think any of them you could fall asleep in. You're not supposed to anyway. So I find that quite funny. But he developed the 9 events of instruction. This framework is what we're going to talk about today. This is a framework to guide your design and delivery of effective instructional experiences. These events are sequential. They're instructional steps that mirror the learning process in a structured and hopefully efficient manner. And so has anybody heard of these 9 events? Okay, a couple of people. Okay, well, good. You came to the right place. Sue has. She's probably doing it right now. All right. So today, my hope for you all is to introduce. Yep. Say that again, Sue. I'm sorry.
I said you're killing me here.
Okay. I'm sorry. I'm trying to gain your attention.
You're making me laugh.
She gets that. She gets that joke. At least I'm hoping she does. You all will get it here in a second. But anyway, back to the script. Today, I'm hoping to introduce you to this or reintroduce you to Gagné's 9 events of instruction in a way that you can practically apply in different instructional contexts that you work in. Some of you work in multiple contexts, right? So I argue that this framework can be used in all of them by the same person with a little bit of thought. As we talk through these 9 events, I encourage you to weigh in using Zoom. Come off mute at any time, ask your questions, make your comments. Love it. We're a cozy group here today. Also, feel free to use your Zoom reactions feature. Give me the thumbs up, thumbs down, confetti, anything to keep us going. Let me know if you're with me, if you would use the reaction with me right now. Everybody know how to use that? Okay, got that. Fantastic. We got some virtual ones too. Love it. Oh, I got a heart. I got the horn. I got some confetti. I love it. This is a good group. I'm going to give it all I got here just because I got all this good feedback here. All right, here we go. We're going to dive into these steps. All right, so I talked already about the diversity of how the 9 events can work, but now I'm going to talk about the actual steps. I'm going to walk through each of the actual steps, starting with gaining attention. That's where that joke comes from. I was trying to get Sue's attention by calling her out here, calling her in. But this first event of the Gagné's 9 events of instruction involves capturing the learner's interest and motivating them to engage with the instruction, right? If they're not paying attention, how can they possibly learn anything from us, right? This can be achieved through using all sorts of attention-grabbing stimuli, such as anecdotes, prompting questions, even the use of multimedia, which is something you all had volunteered that you already do. So what would you do currently? What do you do? Or what ideas do you have about how would you get your students' attention? Anybody feel like sharing? Feel free to use the chat or come off mute.
I will. I use humor.
Humor is a
I
great one.
usually will, use humor, and it's always say something that is way off base,
Love it. Yeah, love that. That's one of my favorites. Using humor and using a story, Dr. Heath. Absolutely. Doing those two things together is a great way to get people leaned in. Absolutely. Those are good ones. What else?
I used
Say
to teach
something
class
unexpected.
on, oh, I'm sorry, Quincy.
No, no, Aaron, please go.
I just wanted to say I used to teach a class on Mondays, so I would often start out class by asking students how their weekend had gone, kind of trying to engage with them on a personal level, to kind of get people loosened up, and then we could move on into the material for the day.
Yeah, it's another good one too. And I argue that that one does a couple things actually for you. It creates relationships, right? And we know, just like in healthcare, when our patients know that their healthcare providers care about them, they tend to see positive gains. Same thing when it comes to instruction and from learning. When we know our students care about us, excuse me, the other way around. When our students know that their instructors and their educators care about them, they tend to do things, lean into it, and put a little extra effort into it. That's awesome. Yeah, awesome. It's a great list here of things. Saying something unexpected, absolutely. Engaging some physical movement. That's another good one too, right? Our brains are connected to our bodies. It's such an undervalued concept. But yeah, these are all great suggestions. But the key here is making a deliberate attempt to get their attention, as opposed to Dr. Gagné walking into a room and you don't know if he's sleeping or awake, and then starts lecturing and people don't know where to pay attention, right? Love it. These are some great answers. Yeah, make it relevant. Yeah, all the above. Keep going. Keep going. Love it. All right, so I'll keep going too. And I want to talk about the second event of Gagné's not events. Once you have their attention, the next step is to communicate the learning objectives to the students. Why? Why the learning objectives? It's because it will outline what they're expected to achieve by the end of the instructional experience, right? No matter if you can do this formally, you could do it casually, informally, but regardless, it is important to communicate expectations. Clear objectives. You're already doing this, I hope. Wink, wink, right? Nod, nod. You're already communicating clear learning objectives for each of your instructional experiences. So this is going to help them understand what the purpose of the instruction is, right? It's going to help them get on the same page with you quicker than without doing this, without communicating your expectations. And then it's going to help you be able to evaluate their process towards that goal, right? What is it that you want them to do upon completion? So how do we do this? How do we do this? How do we set expectations currently? How do you set your expectations for your students in a given class, in a given course, in the lab, in the clinic? How do we do this? How do we know? How do our students know what's expected of them from instructional experience to an instructional experience? Written in the lecture overview. Okay, Shelly, tell me more. Uh, Overview, lecture overview. So maybe however you're delivering that at the lecture. So tell me more if you wouldn't
Yeah,
mind.
so it depends on what I'm doing. But in the modules for the week, I'll list the course overview or the course goals that I have and the learning objectives that I have for the course, but as well as the activities that we're doing so that they know exactly what the intention is for performing the activity. And then we can also talk about how that is going to provide a foundation or a baseline for them to move forward from there. This is important for you to learn because you'll use it in
Love
this
it.
way, in this way, in this way.
Relevancy. Love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, love that. Okay. Yeah, so you know, and to me that sounds, I hope you agree, that's kind of formal, it's kind of structured, right? You're about to deliver a lecture somehow, some way, and so you're making that real stated. But there's ways to do it informally too. You could do it verbally, right? You could even do it verbally. Even if you're coaching on the clinic floor, you might just even state like, here's what the plan is for today, right? This is what we're trying to do, right? Absolutely. Anybody else have other ideas? What about your syllabus or a rubric? Yeah, so I think, you know, the syllabus could be a way of communicating what expectations are too, even coming into your class, for each class, those type of things. these are things that you can do that to help get them in front of what's expected. You know, even just statements of learning objectives as well as rubrics, instructions, all these things. It doesn't have to be, you know, as formal, but the more clearly it's stated, the better. The more we bring that into how we communicate in the beginning, and even dovetail at the end, say, hey, this was the plan when we set out. Here's where we are. This is how close you are to achieving that plan. But yeah, these are all great ideas. So moving right along, after communicating what's expected of our students, we must next help the students recall relevant prior knowledge or experiences related to the new material being presented. Okay. Why do we suppose it helps to help our students recall prior knowledge or prior experience or prior skill related to what we were about to share with them? Why is this important? If you had to take a guess.
I think it brings confidence and some insurance, like I know a little something, and they're really, I think when you do that, students are ready to kind of speak out a little bit more and feel like they do, even though they didn't think maybe it was related to this. And you say it's prior knowledge, or you ask if you experienced this. I'm like, oh, okay, that's what you're talking about. Yeah, I have.
Okay, good. Yeah, yeah. You know, that I think that I would sum it up, uh, relevancy, making some connections to things, and getting them to open up and prepare for the new information coming in. Priming, so to speak, I would say, comes to mind. Absolutely. In the chat here, there's some great ideas coming in here too. Yeah, Amy, I love this idea. Thank you, Bree, by the way, and Holly. Connect new information to what you already know. All right, that's called anchoring, right? And the neuroscience, the cognitive science folks say anchoring new information. So by connecting it to what you already know, you can now create new schema, new ways of understanding what's coming in when you connect it to what you already know, or what you already can do. So anchoring is an awesome, awesome thing that we should do. And it relates all the way back to Aaron's comment a couple of slides ago, talking about asking them how they're doing and getting to know them, right? You start to get to know them. Maybe there's something that particularly that you can bring into the foray of your students when you know about them, and make it personal. That's even an advanced way of going about it. But just in general, hey, you remember last week when we met, we covered this. I'm going to expand on that by doing this, right? What do you recall about that, right? These are all great ways to do that. But this is awesome. You all are killing it so far. But bringing in prior knowledge is going to help you establish connections between existing information and new concepts. That's basically what you're trying to do. Given them that opportunity, this is going to increase their learning capability. Any questions about that? Okay, I'll keep moving forward. Feel free to interject. But the next event then is to present the instructional content. Now you're ready, right? However that is, whether it's a verbal comment, coaching experience on the clinical floor. If it's lab, it's the demonstration that you're about to do, the hands-on demonstration. If it's in class, like Shelley and Bree have talked about, you're about to do your lecture, whatever the case might be, group work, whatever the case may be. This is the opportunity. Now you're ready. Their interest hopefully is piqued, and you're going to deliver the instruction in whatever manner that is intuitive, clear, and organized for them. This event is going to be focused on delivering the content in a way that's easy, right? That it's going to match where they're at, their prior knowledge. So what are your thoughts about presenting instructional content, depending on the environment, in multiple means? What do you think about this idea? Julie is like, if you don't, I will thumb wrestle you. She gave me double thumbs there. So what do you think about that? Do you all have thoughts about this idea of, like, Shelley, you mentioned, part of the lecture. Are there multiple ways that they can interact with the instructional content? What do you think about that idea?
I
shaking her.
like that idea. I try to stimulate with asking questions to get their involvement into the lecture, asking about prior experiences as we try to incorporate new information and how does that apply. I do a lot of hands-on courses, labs, and so we can work at a station and then share as a group. What did you learn? What did you learn? And how do we learn from each other? Because what we learned might have been slightly different. How will we apply that to a clinical situation?
Okay, love it. Yeah, absolutely. I love that Bree is on board. I need to hear from Rachel. UDL, what does this mean? I've never heard of this term. Please explain.
Universal design for learning. And so I've just been looking into it. I just transitioned from clinical practice to academia, so I'm learning how to teach. And so I've just been reading as much as I can about pedagogy and just theories of learning and instruction as well. And so I came across UDL, and it's fascinating because it stimulates different areas of the brain and gives students the option to engage with the material and how best they're comfortable with.
Love that. Love that. Yeah, couldn't have said it better. And I'm so glad you brought this up. So for those of you that aren't that familiar with UDL, I really liked your explanation, Rachel. But this idea of universal design that we all learn in different ways at different times, and presenting the information, the stimulus, the content, the instructional content in multiple ways will cover a wider net, which then also, which is what I said at the beginning, will elevate the chances of them learning this, right? We could do, PowerPoint today, and wouldn't it be fun if I didn't use my voice and we just did everything on chat, but we just sat here for 40, 50 minutes in silence going through this, right? But we're talking about it, we're going interactive, and there's a recording, and maybe some of you will come back to the recording and listen to my jokes, and they'll be even funnier the second time around. And when that happens, the chances of this absorbing, right, goes up. So the idea of UDL offers some principles to follow when it comes to designing instruction in multiple modes, like Shelley and Bree and Dr. Heath also, Deb, you mentioned that too. So fantastic, A++ here. Aaron, thanks for posting the link there. This is fantastic. Any questions about UDL or this idea of instructional of presenting the stimulus? Okay. So naturally, after presenting the content, the next thing to do is to provide instructional guidance. I think this is very intuitive. I think we all do this really well, but this is a must, right? You present this, but we need to provide some support as they try to engage with the content to try to figure it out, right? This might include things like explanations, worked examples, right? Demonstrations. Some of your courses are split up, they're lab-based classes, right? You talk in class and then you give them an opportunity to apply it. Some of you do it in one class. Some of you talk about it on the clinic floor, and then you watch them and you provide oversight as they try to do it with a patient simulated or otherwise, right? So these are things that we also need to be cognitive to make sure that we're offering that support, because we're trying to get them from here to there, and they need structure. They need what's a term that's thrown about, scaffolding, right? This provides the scaffolding to get them to the point that they can do these things independently if that's the goal. Right. So what are some other ideas that we might do to provide some guidance and support for our students? What are other things that you all are doing? Anything that I haven't accounted for yet? What about you, Julie? I know you do a lot of things to provide support. What do you do?
Oh, that's very kind. Thank you. I think of things here too, like you said, with that scaffolding, maybe things like job aids or handouts, or, in the CDI, the Course Design Institute, we use the blueprint, right? That's all designed to give that instruction and guidance. We give prompts or we give suggestions, right? Things that allow for students to engage in that and engage in that learning without saying, okay, go, which can be really overwhelming. So that might be, in some cases written instructions, like the blueprint is, but also you mentioned, for our clinical folks, that might be, is there an SOP, a standard operating procedure, or a guideline that you're going to follow? Are there things to help them think about simulation labs or something, to kind of guide them through that process in a way that you want to engage them with that material?
Love that. Yeah, absolutely. And I think triangulating that with a couple comments here too in the chat, but this idea of probing and prompting questions helps them think about things that you really think are important for them to learn the new knowledge, skill, or attitude, right? The new things. That's absolutely important. Bree talks about rubrics to help with that. Even just presenting a rubric sometimes can help with that. Templatizing things, right? Providing some structure so it doesn't completely go off the rails and all the different ways that students can take it. And then, trying to defeat misconceptions, checking in to find out what's sinking in and what's not. These are all great things. Poll questions. Yeah, these are all great things. Y'all are killing this. This is great. So
I think this is really good with this one, because when you engage the students and they really feel like they know what's going on, and when you're making yourself available in, several different ways, I think it makes a difference, because no matter where they go, if they know what's expected, then they know how to proceed forward. They know what information they need to gather and what they need to do to complete what you're asking them to.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Aaron has this office hours thing. I think we're all talking about connecting with our students too, and we've all been in learning environments and in our training where you're like, what am I supposed to do next? Like, I have no idea, right? And then all the feelings start to bubble to the surface, and all the things that block us from actually learning, right? So thinking about it, yet again, being conscious about what we're doing in what order, providing that structure. Okay, we delivered some stimulus here, some content. All right, offering some structure definitely is in our advantage, their advantage, the students' advantage. So this is good. This is good conversation. So once those two things are done, stimulus is presented, we've provided some guidance and all the different ways we can do that. It's time for them to perform, right? It's for time for them to do something in a way that you can have some insight on how well they're grasping this, moving towards the learning goal. So beyond just the prompting question, it could still be a prompting question that, oh, I'm saying something and now you're getting it, or you're seeing something and now you're hearing something and now you're getting it. But now we're saying, all right, go struggle with this thing. I heard a new term recently, and it was called deliberate struggle. I was like, what are you saying to me? But this is a missing term in my vocabulary, because so we need to have opportunity to struggle with new concepts, right? We need time to do these things. So this is done through performance, right? Eliciting performance. What are ways that we do this? What ways do you do this currently? Brenda, do you have any go-tos? Anything that you do? You've shared some new information. You're trying to help them understand something differently than they did before. What is something that you do to help them perform?
Sometimes giving them the opportunity, like through case studies and that kind of thing, and giving them realistic scenarios to deal with the information.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Case study review. Right now they get to apply what you've been talking about for a while. That's a great thing to do. Discussion boards come to my mind too, if you're in an online learning environment. What about in the clinical setting? I'm curious. Rachel, do you have thoughts here?
Just a simulated patient, or or with an actual patient, just giving them an opportunity to practice some of those skills. And I know in the chat somebody said a safe environment, and so sharing times that maybe we made a mistake as a clinician, or we made a mistake as a student, and connecting with them and making it safe for them to kind of struggle through the new concepts that they're learning.
Of that. Yeah, providing a judgment-free zone and that they get to go and grapple with what it is that you want them to do, get better at it. I love that. Okay, love it. Okay, some great things coming here. Role playing scenarios, sim based, flipped classroom. Yeah, absolutely. But once we deliver the instruction, we got to give them an opportunity to work with it, whether it's knowledge, right? We got to give them a chance going through case-based learning. If it's a physical task, right? Psychomotor, motor skill, where they're learning a new technique, new manipulation, something to that effect. We got to give them an opportunity to perform that thing. Absolutely. Okay, so then we talk about feedback. Oh, Julie, talk to me.
Yeah, question, a kind of a point of clarification question here. So we're talking about these kind of going from one and then going to the next step and the next step. I'm wondering if you might be willing to share a little bit about what happens if you say start to elicit the performance and you notice students are going the wrong direction or not following the instructions. You know, what directionality should we think about when it comes to these 9 events?
Yeah, so that's a sophisticated question, and I'm going to have an simplified answer. But imagine for a second here, especially when we get into steps 4 through 9, I imagine these little loops, these little tiny circles that are within each step as well as between each step. I argue that this is a linear process because that's how it's been created, that's how it's been drafted, that's how it's been tested. You wouldn't gain attention last, right? We wouldn't do that last. That doesn't make sense. But the idea that you provide instructional guidance and it isn't working, you wouldn't, to your point, I don't think I'd keep going. I might go back to step 4.
Mhm.
And so I think this is constructivism. I think these are things that you include in the ACDI and in the Course Design Institute. I think these are things that we do where we not only ask of participants in those courses to do this, we do it ourselves, right? When something isn't being picked up on the discussion board, right? There was a theme about learning objectives, about the hierarchical relationship between learning objectives. That it's a tough concept to think about. We went back at the end of the discussion and summarized that and offered some additional guidance, right? That's a tweener to me. That's 4 or 5, right? That's a tweener for me. So yeah, I know it's nuanced, but I think simplistically thinking, this is what makes us expert educators, right? Is knowing when to go back. You know, we wouldn't go all the way back to step 1 necessarily, but we might float between steps here, between events. There is a relationship. What do you think about that, Julie?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd agree. And I think 1 to me almost is all the way throughout, right? We
Right.
have to keep that attention or redirect that attention. I don't know about you guys, but I've definitely run classroom sessions where I ask students to go off in small groups. Maybe it's think, pair, share, maybe it's a small discussion. And it can be so hard to get them back, right?
Yeah.
They're doing the thing, they've gone off
Mhm.
and they're doing that discussion, but it can really be hard to regain that attention.
Sure.
Or like you said, if Gagné starts falling asleep in his own class, right, we've lost that attention. So yeah, I thank you for sharing that. I think it's
Yeah.
important to think about not only how do we do these stepwise, but what's the relationship between those steps and how might we either redirect or, you know, provide a clarifying lecture. I saw things in the chat around correcting misconceptions, things like that. So thank you for clarifying.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it's probably a session in itself to talk about these little things, these idiosyncrasies between these steps. Maybe we could do that in the future, but yeah, I'm glad you brought that up.
Can I
Yeah,
can I ask
Rachel.
a question kind of along those lines? Is there a time when it's appropriate to skip steps, or maybe we go back to, as Julie said, gain attention, and then we kind of accelerate through the process, but we may not go through each one stepwise.
Y'all are asking some tough questions today. Let's see. Yeah, no, that's a brilliant question. I love it. Yes. I don't know if I would skip steps, but this is what I would say. I'd say 2 things. When we get good at doing this, right, when it becomes intuitive, it becomes blurry. Like I got to remember to get their attention. I got to remember to get their attention. I got to remember to share the learning objectives. There'll come a time where you'll just start that way, right? And then so now it's kind of blurry, but you're doing it. You're doing it in your own way, and it's effective. So I think that's one way to look at it. But another way is that your learning objectives should dictate. I'm going to give a short analogy as quick as I can. Running a marathon. For somebody that's run 10 marathons, the learning objective is not going to be how to tie your shoes. You could skip steps for that person when it comes to, all right, you're going to get up in the morning and you're going to run a 6-minute mile for 27 miles, right? That you could skip that, right? You don't need to go through these steps. But for somebody that's never run a marathon, you might be slow down, and if that's the learning objective, to tie a runner's knot so your shoes don't fly off, that could be a learning objective. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Yes,
I love the
thank you.
high nods. Thank you for letting me off the hook. That's a tough question, but that's a good question though. Okay, good. All right. So the next event is to provide students feedback. This is a big one. We got to provide feedback on their performance. We've asked for their performance. Now we gotta get feedback. And this is going to highlight, during that feedback process, we should strive to highlight the strengths and also the opportunities for improvement, not just what they're bad at, right? This constructive feedback is going to help reinforce what we want, the performance that we're looking for, and it's going to allow them also, by providing them coaching, formally or informally feedback, it's going to allow them to monitor their own performance, right? They're going to cue in on their own performance, and all the while they're moving towards those learning goals, those learning objectives. So coming up to our next week, next Wednesday, same time, same channel here, we got a session, TLC session, second part. It's going to talk specifically about constructive feedback. We'll also cover this in the CDI courses that we offer, the one currently going on, as well as the one coming up this summer. And so there are a lot of frameworks for providing constructive instructional feedback. I just learned a new one. Tell me if you've heard about this one. It's an acronym called TAG, T-A-G. Has anybody heard of this? TAG. I just heard about it on Edutopia. When it comes to constructive feedback, T, tell some students something that you liked about their performance. Start with that. Second, ask a question about their performance. Instead of saying, you were terrible, right? Ask a question to ask them to clarify things for you. And then give them a suggestion for improvement. We've heard of sandwich technique and 3 W's and all these different frameworks, and there are a lot out there. We can talk about those all day, but this felt clean. I was like, yeah, I can do that. I can remember tag. I like playing tag as a kid. Right. So anyway, food for thought. Tag can be used for, the way I could see it and the way I interpret it, can be used for instructor to student relationships, as well as student to student, right? If you're looking for group work, collaborative work, case reviews, those type of things, you might suggest this, include this in your instructional guidance. You might say, hey, if you want to do this for each other, it could be a great way to do it. So yeah, ask, tell, ask. Yep, I like that. Yep, parent child. I love it, Brenda. This is good. Okay. You want to know more frameworks, let us know. We've got a lot out there. Okay, so once we've provided some feedback and to Julie's question, even Rachel's, the iterative part, there might be multiple times to give feedback, not just once, but then it's time to assess performance, right? Formally. How do we do this? How do we know? And I've been harping on this idea of learning objectives. How do we know a learning objective has been achieved?
I can say for clinic and for, you're on the clinic floor, is when a student successfully completes a skill that they're assigned to do, whether it's a pap smear or something, and they do a job that I know that what I've taught them is been achieved.
Okay. Yeah, and that's important, and especially in the clinical setting, right? They got to physically do something, right? So performance, I keep using that word as opposed to other ways of doing that. Love that. Any other ideas? Yeah, teach backs. Holly says teach backs here. Teach it to somebody else. That's like one of the hardest forms of learning is if you could teach it to the next person. That's a great one. Quizzes. Yep. He talks about absolutely. Not my favorite. I love it. Yeah. Can you do a pap smear? Yeah. Let's take this 5-point quiz. See if you got it. Yep. 3 out of 10. All right. So, second to last event here is about assessing students' performance to determine if they've achieved that learning goal. We got to do it, right? We got to do it. There's lots of methods out there. You all have this down: tests, papers, projects, practicals, all these things, depending on the nature of instruction, it should match, right? So then that takes us to the last one, the last event here. And this is one of my favorites because I think we don't do it enough. I don't think we do it enough, but I think it's really, really helpful for the big picture. For the big picture, the last event, we make an effort to promote retention of the material learned, right? As well as facilitate transfer of these new knowledge, skill, or beliefs, knowledge, skill, or attitudes to the real world situations that you're training them for. Brenda, Shelley, Rachel, you guys have ideas on how we might do that?
So a lot of the
Victoria?
time I will do that with case-based scenarios. I think that's the easiest way for audiology. We learn a lot when we have to assess a patient, just like any other medical professional. And so having them make that connection, what is the range of normal with any anatomy? There's a range of normal, so you have to understand the range of normal and how the results that they gather from doing a hearing test fit into that range of normal or a range of a disorder. It doesn't always present in the same manner, so making that generalization to be able to pull all of the data together and then see how that works into a case-based scenario.
Love that. And that was one of my points that I was going to share is like providing an opportunity to apply it in a real world context that might be slightly different, right? That's very effective. I like that. What else?
I was going to say the same thing. Sometimes, we'll do simulations and have students practice something, and then we have an opportunity fairly closely to that for them to go out and actually practice it in a real world setting. So, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And Holly talks about repetition, practice. Absolutely.
There's something that I like. I don't know if this is the technical name for it, but we call it spirals. So as you learn a skill or information or knowledge, we continue to build upon that. And even in the next course or the next training, you still have to perform that skill or you still have to use that knowledge. And that's something, I'm in the PA department. So if you're writing a history and physical, you're doing an exam, we're building upon. So once we teach and give understanding, you're going to use that same knowledge and skills as you move forward. So you're building, so you continue to build and use those same things over and over again, so you're always retaining that information.
So it sounds like, Reed, that what you're describing is it's kind of built in to your instructional goal, perhaps your learning goal, that there's a level that's designed to help them increase their retention and transfer, and that you're spiraling them up to get there, that it's already included. I love that. I love that. That's very formal, but also what a great goal that we all, I wish I do better. I hope to do better at aspiring to that. That's really good. Very
I
cool.
learned that from Saxon Math as a homeschooling
Okay.
mom. So
Okay. Good to
years
know.
ago, and
Good to
I've
know.
kept it because it works great.
Good to know. Love it. Okay. Saxon Math. We got some people, we got some fans. Okay. So in just a matter of minutes here, that is the 9 steps. That is the 9 events of Gagné's 9 events of instruction. I want to open it up. Are there any follow-up questions that I might be able to answer for you before we wrap up? If there are no questions, maybe Victoria, if I may ask you, now that we've reviewed this, how might you see using, if you chose to do so, these night events impacting your classes?
Well, I think the first thing is I want to buy the book and read the book.
Okay.
I'm not sure that given my class size and how do I say this? The particular set of circumstances that I am in as an instructor,
Sure.
I'm really unsure because it's like I teach content and then that has to be demonstrated in the clinic where I am not present and I am not part of the evaluation process. So a lot of what I do is a cross my fingers kind of a thing for now. I'm
Sure.
looking at changing that. But I know Dr. Jenna Lau is on this training. And so I already emailed her and said, hey, do you want to get the book and read it together and talk about it? And maybe between the two of us, we can kind of get a core group together. So yeah, so I don't know if that really answers your question, but
I think so.
it's intriguing to me. I very much, I have that brain. I like frameworks. I like to order and sequence things. And since you called on me, I'm just going to talk a little more and just make a pitch for CDI. Anyone who's on this training, if you have not done CDI, I really urge you to give that some fair consideration because it's a pain to go through, not going to lie, but the pain is worth it because it will utterly transform everything that you prepare to present, whether it's a little lunch and learn thing for your peers or if it's a whole entire course. And it's also kind of made me a snob because I look at things now and I'm like, oh, what were they thinking? But anyway.
That is one of our learning goals, is to make you a snob. I promise that is not true, but thank you so much, Victoria, in so many ways. Thank you for plugging the CDI. Thanks for sharing what your experience was. And thanks for being vulnerable and sharing your perspective about your teaching experience situation currently. I know you have large classes and it's tough. It's tough, but I do believe that there's bits and pieces here that you could pick from that, integrate into your instructional practice if you don't already. And might have some advancements. So thank you for that. In respect for time, I just want to share a couple final takeaways and plug a few things, but feel free to drop if you need to, and we'll hang out if you have further questions. Gagné's, not events. So for me, there are 4 things that I think are worth taking away from this conversation, at least the beginning. The finer points about this: it offers a structured approach. So oftentimes we get here and you have the best laid plan and things go out when the action starts. And I think that really happens in those informal interactions that could be so valuable and so helpful for helping your students reach those learning objectives that you set out for them. I think of every moment in the hallway, in the classroom, big classroom, small classroom, are all opportunities to help. And I know you all are doing that already. So think about adopting this framework or integrating this framework in a way that helps you come up with a structured process for designing your instruction. All right. And secondly, I can't emphasize this enough that it's so important to connect to your learning objectives, right? There's a reason we have those. You all put so much time and thought into those things. They roll up to the bigger program, and they're interdependent upon other things. Your classes, some of you, your classes bump into each other, right? And so it's so important to think about that. And what better way than to think about it in these 9 events, right? It keeps things on the rails, in my opinion. So think about it that way. And then following the 9 events, also I think will help with engagement and participation. It might have been different when this framework was initially introduced, but I think now following it, there's so many opportunities for engagement and interactions. You all picked up on that and made some really great suggestions about polling and discussion questions, working in groups, peer-to-peer learning experiences, and other things. This framework holds up today and still does that, even though some of the technologies we talked about didn't exist at the time that this framework came about. And then lastly, no matter the learning environment, I think this framework follows. I think it can be still applied. I keep saying that, but the idea of formative and summative assessment. If I'm going back to the marathon training, right? Tying your shoes might not be a learning objective, so you don't necessarily need to practice that or have some sort of practical exam if somebody can tie a runner's knot. But if for somebody that's beginning, you might need to do that, right? So back to the learning objectives, providing the assessments both formative and summative is so crucial. So that being said, I just want to wrap up by sharing a couple additional resources here. I couldn't have, I promise I did not pay Victoria. Oh, Aaron beat me to it. Here's some resources. Including the Course Design Institute. It's offered now twice. We're offering it again this summer, where it's synchronous. You meet every week with us and learn about all these things and more. And it's currently going on now asynchronously, where you miss out on meeting us in person on Zoom, but it's even cooler because there's a lot of interactions, even asynchronously. Julie and Aaron are crushing that. So didn't get in asynchronously, it'll be offered again in the near future. And then we got the TLC YouTube channel, where all these things will be posted, including today's recording, in the next couple of days. And then we have a really fancy TLC resources page, thanks to Julie here. All sorts of things are here. If you haven't visited lately, we're always adding new stuff to it. And then if you still have questions, you can always meet with us via consultation. You can find the link in our email signature or on our website to schedule a consultation at any time that works for you. And then just the final thoughts is we've got EdTech course coming up this spring in April. If you're interested in that, we have a few folks that have completed that. I think Jenna, you've completed that. That's an awesome course as well. We've got a podcast series coming out this spring, late spring, on EdTech. Some really cool things about EdTech. Course Design Institute I already talked about. We have our newsletter that comes out the first Wednesday of every month. We have the Journal Club, which is the first Friday of every month. If you're interested in ed research, we have some really cool conversations there. And then, of course, we have the TLC Level Up certificate program. Get credit for hanging out with us, taking our courses. And I think the president, as well as the president and Clinton are attaching, let me check my notes here, $2 million. I think I might have that wrong, but they're offering an incentive for completing the course, the certificate program. Is it not $2 million? Did I get that wrong? Check your inbox. There's some monetary funding available if you participate in the Level Up. All right, otherwise, I'll hang out here. If you have any further questions, you know how to get a hold of us. Thank you for choosing to hang out with us today. We hope to see you next Wednesday, okay?